Time now for business news with Ari Rabinovitch. And Ari, let's start with a question. How much are you willing to pay for a cup of coffee? Seems many people have reached their limit, Ari.
Absolutely, and I'm pretty much a coffee snob, Cynthia, so it better be good if I'm going to pay what some places are charging. But if it is, certainly. One thing is for sure, Starbucks is feeling the pinch. Now, I should mention, in their latest quarterly earnings, they actually did meet analyst expectations for profits and revenue. But how they got to those numbers is another story and kind of paints the picture for what consumers think of it. So in North America, the number of overall transactions at Starbucks fell, but the value of each transaction was higher than before. I'll leave you to come to your own conclusions about what that could mean for some customers that decide to go to Starbucks eventually. But internationally, Starbucks saw a bigger drop in revenue, especially in China, which was down 14% compared to the same quarter last year. Now, Starbucks says they are aware that customers are trying to pull back on their spending because, frankly, well, Starbucks is a little more expensive than some of the competition. So they said they are working on discounts and more loyalty offerings, but also trying to be more efficient to protect their bottom line.
I think people are just, instead of going every day, they're going once or twice a week instead, perhaps.
Yeah, not their daily coffee fill-up, more like a treat once in a while.
Right, exactly. Okay, we've had two recent interest rate cuts here in Canada, but it's a different story south of the border.
But the good news, Cynthia, is we got a little bit of a hint today from the U.S. Central Bank that they're not far behind. So the U.S. Fed today pretty much said what most people expected. No changes to interest rates, at least not yet, because the U.S. economy is not the same as the Canadian economy, and maybe they're not ready yet, but the next interest rate announcement will come in September, and that's when analysts expect the first cut to come. And if, like you mentioned, Cynthia, we've already had two cuts so far this year, and the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said in his statement that the U.S. Central Bank is confident in its fight against inflation, and that there are no reasons to suggest that the path towards a rate cut is being offset by perhaps inflation spiking or any changes in the labor market that the U.S. Fed wants to avoid. So it does look like the path is laid for a first interest rate cut in September, maybe even another one before that is done. Now, what does this mean for Canadians? Well, the Bank of Canada is a separate entity from the U.S. Federal Reserve, but there is the difference in our currency. Right now, the U.S. dollar is stronger than the Canadian dollar, and if that continues, it could mean a big issue for inflation because of the divergence in our currencies. But now that it looks like the U.S. Fed will be in the path to cut interest rates, that should mean that our currencies will catch up to each other. So it should be good news for us as well, Cynthia, here in Canada.
All right, good to know. Now, the giant tech firms have been reporting earnings this week, Ari, and today we're hearing from Meta. How did Meta do?
Well, pretty good, actually, Cynthia, and it's all about artificial intelligence. I feel like I say that at least once every time that we talk, because Meta Platforms is also very much into that side of the business, especially in the technology space. So they said in their latest earnings that they did beat on the top and bottom line, revenue and profits higher than analyst expectations. In fact, revenue last quarter was up 22% compared to that of last year. One of the big drivers of revenue for Meta Platforms, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, as well as Threads, well, it's advertising. And artificial intelligence does play into that, and that has to do with how it develops its user-facing products, and also for its own AI assistant. CEO Mark Zuckerberg said that Meta AI is on track to be the most used AI assistant in the world by the end of the year. So investors continue to rally behind Meta Platforms. Today, the stock gained more than 3%, and it's up about 34% so far this year. So once again, Cynthia, another example of a big tech company that's getting all in on artificial intelligence, and that seems to be sending a ripple effect throughout the industry.
Definitely. All right, Ari, as always, thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
You too.